Today we're going to be learning Yevamot Daf Samch Zayin. This month's Shiurim are sponsored by Leora and Jonathan Kukin and Cynthia and Abe Steinberger in honor of Rella Feldman and Curtis Pulitzer. In anticipation of a beautiful Shabbat shared with cherished friends, thank you to our gracious hosts, and also commemorating the 35th yahrzeit of Rella's beloved father, Alav Shalom Isaac Levenstein. And today's Daf is sponsored by Julie Landau and the Shloshim of her mother, Irene Landau. We miss her so much already. And today's daf is sponsored by Ricky and Alan Zibit in honor of their dear grandson, Noah Samuel Zibit, Noch Shalom ben Elon Yitzchak HaKohen, on the occasion of his bar mitzvah, Parshat Emor in Chutz La'aretz. Mazal tov. Okay, we're going to get started with our daf. I want to review a few things we did yesterday. I know the tzon barzel and milog is always very confusing. I've told you once before that the reason I thought about doing these bookmarks was because of them, because it's always this confusing term that you always have to go back to and try to figure out. So first of all, you can always use them. They'll help you, the bookmarks. If you have them, I know we're supposed to be sending out soon the new ones. They're imprinting. So patience, but they will get there. I want to just remind you now what the issue is. So there's two kinds of property that a woman brings into marriage. Okay, her parents give her things. It's somewhat like a dowry, right? It's this idea that they give things for the woman to use when she's married. But you have to remember, in those days, and like I said, also in most cultures until about 100 or so years ago, women couldn't own property on their own. So when a woman comes with property into a marriage, the husband has rights to it. He can use it, he can benefit from it and all that. So both nichse milog and nichse tzon barzel, the husband has rights to during the marriage to get the proceeds of. So now we're talking about slaves, for instance. So anything the slaves work, she brings in slaves. If they do work, the husband gets the benefits, but the husband's also responsible to feed them, right? But it splits into two. Now, I assume this is sort of that she can choose how she wants to bring them into the marriage. Are they nichse milog or are they tzon barzel? And it's like an insurance plan, right? There's different, there's a risk factor, right? Who's responsible for what and what the risk factor is, it kind of depends. So now we have property that she brings in that she says, right, I'm going to take these out as I bring them in. I have my grandmother's beautiful candelabra, as I said yesterday, or my grandmother's, whatever it might be. I want this to go in with me, go out with me, whatever value it's at. It could go down in value. It doesn't matter. For me, it's important sentimental value, right? I'm going to take it as is. The other property, tzon barzel, she brings into the marriage, but she evaluates it when it comes in. That's what we saw, right? About a few cases where they even evaluate exactly how much money it is. And the husband has to give her back that value at the end. The whole discussion at the end of the daf was about the nichse tzon barzel. When she goes to get them back, let's say, right, again, in what event? It goes into the ketubah, so it's dependent on divorce or death. When she goes to get that back, can she demand the item itself? And then they, figure out the difference in price. Did it go up? Did it go down? And they kind of do a monetary transaction there, right? Either she returns him some money or he returns her some money, but she can say, I want the object itself. Or can he say, no, all you have is, the value of it. I give you back the value. I keep the object. Okay. So Rav Yehuda had said, there's this shevach beit aviyah. It could be, I explained it in one way yesterday. I read up about it a little more. I saw that it could be explained as her parents sent it into the marriage with her to represent their good name, right? They sent gifts, these things for her to use and show off, I'm from this family, and even for the husband to use and say, look, this comes from my wife's family. So because of that, they have rights to get it back though, right? They brought it in because of the marriage. Now the marriage is dissolved. They get it back. According to Rabbi Ami, no, it's not like that, okay? It went in as nichse tzon barzel. The nichse milog are like that really, but the nichse tzon barzel, no, came in as that, goes out, he just owes her the value. Okay, so again, it's value versus object. Now again, even within the value, which is the track of the tzon barzel, still she could claim rights to the object. Again, she doesn't get it at the value it is now, she gets it at whatever value it was then. So again, that would mean if it was worth 1,000 shekel to begin with, or let's go with dollars, okay, it was worth $1,000. Now it's worth $1,500. So she would have to she would get the object back and pay him $500, okay, because she's getting an item that's worth more than she's supposed to get back, but she could still claim rights to the item. That's the whole question. Can she or not? Now is the whole machloket on yesterday's daf. So we ended with this case now about if you say, right, we're going to have this whole question. Rav Yehuda held that she can get the item back, but they had this case where the yatomim immediately went in, took this cloak that she had brought into the marriage as tzon barzel and used it as burial shrouds. And when you use something as burial shrouds, it becomes forbidden to benefit from. So right now, it basically is used by the Yomi, and now it's forbidden. So what do we say? It's forbidden. She can't claim it back, even though she had what we call a lien on it, a shibud, right? She had rights to take back lima, according to Rav Yehuda. But since they used it as burial shrouds, that shiabud, that lien, disappeared. How do we know? Like, where does this come from? So, Rava lita'ameh. Rava goes, we're now starting at the end of Samach Vav Amud Bet. Rava goes according to his own opinion, Da'ama Rava, hekdesh, chametz, v'shechur, mafki'im midei shiabud. It was Rava who said this halacha before about the sons and how she doesn't get, they basically acquired it to use as burial shrouds. And we said, right, do you remember, we said yesterday, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda said, it's just that she can claim it, but if she doesn't claim it, it stays as theirs. You understand? That's like an important point. As long as she doesn't claim it in court, the husband's family could just give her back 1,000 shekels or $1,000, whatever it is, right? We said $1,000. Husband could just give her $1,000. If she says, but I want my item, then she has rights to it. But theoretically, if she doesn't claim that, they could just give her $1,000 because in the end, what she really brought into the marriage was a value. So because they did have rights to it, because she hadn't yet claimed it, then their action uprooted the shibud, the lien she had. Because in the end, the tzon barzel, she doesn't own them really at all. She only owns a right to the value of it. It's no different than, and we're going to now talk about these cases, where let's say I take out a loan from you, and I say, in the event that I don't pay back the loan, take my watch. Now, who owns the watch, me or you? I own the watch. Therefore, Rava comes and says, even though you have a lien on my watch, theoretically, if I don't pay back the loan, you could take it away from me. But if before you take it away from me, I do one of the following things. I'm makdish it. I say, I'm giving my watch to the temple. Okay, Rashi has a big debate. Maybe you can't say it when it comes to a watch. Maybe it's only if it's an animal that has sanctity of its body. I don't want to get into that whole thing because we'll never finish the daf if I start with that. But you should just know that Rashi has a debate here, whether we're talking about kedushat aguf or kedushat damim. Okay, if you know what that means, right? We've discussed a few times, kedushat aguf is the body itself is sanctified to the temple like an animal because it'll be sacrificed, as opposed to my watch, which really what I mean is I'm going to give the value of my watch to the temple. The temple doesn't need my watch. I mean, maybe, right? But that's called kedushat damim, even if I would bring my actual watch. But forget that, okay? But the point is, if I sanctify something, there's machloket about this, whether it's also kedushat damim. Rashi says clearly only kedushat aguf. But let's say it's my animal, okay? So we'll take a case that works with Rashi, and you have a lien on my animal because I took a loan out, and then I sanctify the animal to the temple. That overrides the shibud because in the end, it's mine. So if I sanctify it and now it becomes, and here's going to be why it's similar to our case, when they use it as burial shrouds, it becomes forbidden for anyone to benefit from it. Likewise here, my animal, I sanctified to the temple, no one can benefit from now. It belongs to the temple. Since I'm the owner, I can do that, even though you have a lien on it. That overrides a shibud. Okay, so that's what happened here with the glima. She had a shibud on it. But it didn't matter because they overrode it by using it as burial shrouds. And they had the rights to do it because it was actually in their possession. Because the tzon barzel are really theirs. It's just that she has rights to demand it back, but only to demand it back, not that they're actually hers. And shiur, and chametz. Let's say I have a lien, you have a lien on my food, okay? And let's say you're a Gentile. So when Pesach comes, and I don't sell it, I don't do anything with it, right? I leave it, and it's in my possession. Well, chametz shabbal alav Pesach becomes forbidden to benefit from. So the lien is overridden because I basically have to destroy that chametz. And shiur, if I have a slave, this is a little different because those two are insure b'hana'ah, which is exactly like our case, where burial shrouds become forbidden to benefit from. Shiur is something different. I have a Canaanite slave that's lien to you, but I free him, and now he's Jewish. So he's no longer a slave. So again, your lien is gone. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have rights to claim something else in my property, but nothing in particular is lien to your loan right now, to my loan. Oh, next, another case. I'm a Rav Yehuda. Now remember, it's very important to remember, Rav Yehuda is the one who said she has rights to claim the actual item and say, I want it back. And obviously they do a money transaction after, but she can get the actual item back. So Rabbi Yehuda is going to say something which is very similar to what he said before, and the Gemara is going to say, well, you already said this. Why are you saying this again? She gave him she brought into the marriage these two beautiful glass vases that are worth 1,000 shekel altogether. Okay, 500 each, whatever they are. Okay, I'm just giving an example of a glass vase. And they're worth 1,000 zuz. By the end of the marriage, when he divorced her or he died, they were together worth 2,000 zuz. Each one is now worth 1,000 zuz, which was each one is worth the entire value of what she was owed. So one she takes back and she says, okay, this is in place of 1,000 shekel you owe me. What about the second one? So he says, going with what he said before, Shevach Beit Avia means this was her stuff. She could take it back. So she could take back the second one and pay him 1,000 zuz. So the Gemara says, my kamashmalan, Shevach Beit Avia dida have? What you're trying to tell us, because it was her parents' thing. She, and it was there for the respect of her family, so she can take it back. But my kamashmalan, right? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, you already taught us that. What's new in this case? Beforehand, when we said this, we were talking about a case where, let's say she was owed 1,000 and the object was worth 1,500. So she takes the whole object and returns 500. But that's not this case. This case, she was only owed 1,000 shekel, 1,000 zuz. And one of these objects was already the entire amount. So when she goes to collect the second one, she's actually not owed any money. Maybe in that case, she can't claim to the husband, that I want my other vase back, because he doesn't owe her any money at this point. So because of that, you might have thought that she loses her rights to claim the second one. And the answer is no. It doesn't matter that she has nothing to collect anymore. She can still claim rights to the item and pay back the money. Okay? That's the chiddush of this, that you wouldn't have necessarily derived from the regular case. New Mishna. Bat kohen sheniset lekohen vamet. V'hinicha me'uberet. I'm sorry, did I say bat kohen? Bat Yisrael. Bat Yisrael, I'm not sure what I said, but somehow I have in my head that maybe I said bat kohen. Anyway, let's start again. Bat Yisrael. She's married. She's a daughter of an Israelite. So she can't eat truma, right? But she's married to a kohen. So she's allowed to eat truma. Okay, remember there's basic laws here. She can eat truma while she's married to the kohen. As soon as he dies, she can't, unless she has children. Well, in this case, okay, now we're actually not talking about her here. That's not going to be the issue. The next mission is going to be her. But what if she has children? So she can eat truma, okay? What's the status of her tzon barzel? And we're going to talk about this. It's going to be it's going to be very hard to understand in the beginning because it's a little bit far in this whole concept. But and it's actually connected to Roe versus Wade and the overturning of it. So it's a good, interesting daf to be learning right now. She's hinicha me'uberet. He leaves her pregnant. Okay, that means he has some other children and she's pregnant. Lo yochlu avadeha b'truma mipnei chelko shelubav. Right, the whole discussion is how much is a fetus considered a life, right? So there's all different sugyas that talk about this. And in fact, some sugyas talk about the fetus is not considered important at all, especially when it comes to endangering the mother's life. Okay, the mother's life comes first because we don't view the ubar as a fetus, right? So now, like as just a fetus and not that. Those sugya would seem to indicate, right, not so important. This sugya is going to show the opposite. A fetus is considered significant. Okay, why? And that's why these sugyot are fascinating. How seriously do we take an ubar? Now, this is again a very strange concept to get, but listen to what they say. The slaves can't eat truma now. The tzon barzel. Now, who are the tzon barzel? They're the ones that belong really to the husband right now. Okay, because all he really needs to do is return the value of them. Melog. Okay, let's just assume the wife's pregnant. She has children. What will happen? The wife will continue to eat truma because she has children from that husband. And therefore her nichse melog, which basically go by her, are going to eat truma. Here, the nichse tzon barzel, which you would think the opposite. They're in the husband's property. Of course they can eat truma. They're from a kohen. But no, there's something weird going on here. And this is why it's a little hard to understand. Even the Gemara is going to struggle to say what's the reason for this. Because the ubar is in existence, there's a fetus there. The fetus has ownership rights. And this is fascinating. In terms of development of fetus and has ownership rights already to the inheritance right now. as a fetus. And so that means the fetus has ownership rights to the tzon barzel. He's a part owner of these slaves. Because he's a fetus and not born and not yet a kohen, so he messes it up for the tzon barzel, even though there's other brothers. Let's say there's 4 brothers and there's him. He owns 1/5 of the avadim. That's enough to mess up the avadim and say, you cannot eat truma until this ubar is born. We don't really know why this works yet. We'll wait till the Gemara to get there and we'll see 2 different possibilities as to why this is. But that's the concept. Because he's a part owner, he messes it up. So now, right, we're going to read why. How can we give the ubar so much power? So they say, Shaha'ubar posel ve'eno ma'achil divrei Rabbi Yosi. Because the ubar is known, now this is in a regular case, okay, where this is about the woman, forget about her slaves. If a woman is pregnant when her husband dies without children, okay, or her husband, right, it would have to be the husband dies, and they don't have any other children, but she's pregnant. We've talked about this in terms of Yibum. Now we're going to talk about it in terms of truma. If she's about Yisrael, and we don't yet know if she's going to have a child yet, so she can't yet eat truma until the child's born. Then she can say, oh, I still belong to the house. Okay, so then she can eat truma. So that means eino ma'achil. The ubar is not ma'achil, a woman with truma. The fact that she's pregnant is not enough to say, I'm still connected with my father's family, my husband's family. Okay, again, kol od she's connected through kids. We saw that yesterday with the moms here, right? As long as she's connected through kids, yes, she's part of his family. But she's only pregnant, that's not enough. And if in the flip case, she's a bat kohen and her husband's a yisrael and he dies and she wants to go back to eat in her father's house, ubar posel, the ubar messes her up. Okay, and this we're going to see at the very end of today's stuff, because the pasuk says, kine uleha. She goes back to eat in her father's house. If her husband dies, she gets to go back to eat like she was in her youth. Now, in your youth, you're not pregnant. So if she's pregnant, she can't eat in her family's house. Okay, if they're the truma eating people, right? So again, truma is an ubal, messes you up if you're a bat kohen, and doesn't allow you to eat truma if you're a bat yisrael and you're married to a kohen. So from here he learns this ubal has significance to mess things up, basically, and that's why in the other case, again, it's not in a direct correlation. And we're going to see the reason is really kind of different, but it gives the ubar significance. And then once the ubar is significant, we're going to see why that case actually, why he messes it up for the for the avdei tzon barzel. Now the next part of the Mishna is Amrulo. The rabbis say to him, what are you talking about? And I see someone asked about this. You're going to come to this ridiculous conclusion according to what you're saying, because then you're going to say a bat kohen who's even married to a kohen. Basically, if you say the ubar messes things up, the ubar is going to mess things up as well there. Okay? And because the ubar has the power to mess things up. And then what you're going to say then, when either which way she's can eat truma, that we're going to mess up the avadim. So the rabbis don't really like his opinion. See, bio. The Gemara starts off with this big question. Tama de Rabbi Yosi, what's his reason? Is it mishum de kasaval ubar mebe'ez zara zalhu? Do we say that the ubar right now, okay, she was married, she's a bat yisrael, married to a kohen. She is a zara, in essence, right? She's not a bat kohen. She doesn't have any part in truma, only through the husband. Now, because she's a zara, we're going to call the ubar who's in her womb. There's also Gemaras that say ubar yerech imohu. Basically, the ubar is just another, it's like a limb of the mother. This basically shows less significance to the ubar, in which case, right, the ubar is just part of the mother, which means it's not really its own entity in and of itself. So if the ubar is just part of the mother, well, then whatever the status of the mother is, that's the status of the ubar until the ubar comes out into the world. Once the ubar comes out into the world, well, then we have a son of a kohen. But as long as it's in the mother's womb, again, it's a little hard to understand why they would say this, because in the end, it's from the father. But they say, basically, we view the ubar as an appendage of the mother. Because of that, it's basically going to be, okay, Caroline, your question, hold off, we're going to get there, okay, whether it matters, whether it's a son or a daughter. We're going to see some other opinions that depended on that. But in any case, we're now going to say, or at least discuss those issues. But right now, we're going to say that this is basically an appendage of the mother. The mother's a non-kohen, so the ubar is a non-kohen. So again, you're going to have this case where the ownership rights of this eved is partially by a non-kohen, that's going to mess him up for eating truma. Because let's say in my example, 1/5 of it, right, of who owns him is not a kohen. Dilma, or maybe it's for a different reason. There's a drasha in the pasuk. The pasuk says with the kohen, Yelid Beito can eat truma. Okay, Yelid Beito Yochai, meaning anyone born into his house can eat. And they darshan the Yochal, instead of Yochal, Ya'achil, can feed, can cause others to eat. So they say, Yilod Ma'achil, that means someone who's born can help someone eat truma. Like, for example, the Bat Yisrael gives birth to a kohen, right? A child whose father is a kohen, and the father's dead. That child allows her to eat, but only when he's born. But Eino Yilod, Eino Ma'achil. But an unborn child does not have the power to allow someone else to eat. And you have to take it a little farther, messes up someone else for eating. And that's exactly our case. Because he's unborn and he's a part owner of this edit, he messes him up. Not because he's ubar b'me'ez zara, that's not the reason. It's because he's an ubal and he's not born. And there's a drasha on the verse that says only born children can let people eat. So now, since one of the possible inheritors is not born yet, that messes up the slave. So which reason is it? We don't know. L'may nafkamina, what's the difference? Well, li'ubar b'me'ei kohenet. The whole nafkamina would be if it's in the body of a bat kohen. If it's in the body of a bat kohen, this is kind of what the rabbis were saying back to Rabbi Yosi, is that according to what you're saying, a bat kohen would be messed up as well because she has an eno yilod in her womb, right? Any unborn child messes things up. As opposed to if you say he goes by the mother, well, in that case, he goes by the mother's a kohen also, so he would be allowed to eat. So that would be the nafkamina, the difference, the halach. So which one is it? Well, machloket. Amar Rabba, haynu tamid Rabbi Yosi, v'kasav rubar b'me'ez zara zarhu. Rabbi Yosef omer yilo ma'achil she'enu yilod eno ma'achil. Each one sides on a different side. Now, Rav Yosef said any unborn child will mess it up, even that would include even if she was a bat kohen and she was pregnant and she was married to a kohen, she wouldn't go back to eat in her father's house and she wouldn't be allowed to eat with the, right? Well, again, her slaves, sorry, here we're talking about the slaves of this bat kohen, the tzon barzel, wouldn't be allowed to eat even though all their owners are kohanim, right? Either which way you look at it, they're kohanim. Because just because he's eno yilod, he messes it up. So meitive, so we have a question from the following braita. Amrula Rabbi Yosi. Harshi adata lanu al bat kohen bat yisrael the kohen mahu. Okay, it's very similar to the wording in our Mishna. That what, right? They said to Rabbi Yosi, once you said this, right? What are you going to say about a bat kohen to a kohen? Amar lahem zo shamati v'zo lo shamati. I have a tradition about the bat yisrael a kohen. I don't have a tradition about a bat kohen to a kohen. I never learned that. So now this would only work if you say what, like Rabba. Because then there'd be a difference, right? If you say it all goes by the mother and the mother's either a zara or she's a kohen. So that's what Rabbi Yosi says. Listen, I learned about it this way. If it's a bat Yisrael, I know that the slaves can't eat because the ubar messes it up because he goes by the mother. If she's a bat kohen, I don't know. I never really learned about it. But if his whole logic is it's just that an unborn, right, a fetus is going to mess up anyone the fetus potentially owns, well, maizo shamati v'zo lo shamati. Doesn't make a difference if she's a bat kohen or she's a bat Yisrael. It's exactly the case. He couldn't say, I never heard that. It's exactly what he holds. So kasha. That is actually a difficulty according to that approach of Rav Yosef, that it has to do with any unborn fetus messes someone up. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. So now Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel the following statement. It's going to sound very similar to things we've seen. Zo divrei Rabbi Yosi. This is Rabbi Yosi. Aval, now we're going to have not just the Chachamim question him, but we're going to actually have their opinion. Aval Chachamim omrim, yesh lo banim ochlim mishum banim, ein lo banim ochlim mishum achim, ein lo achim ochlim mishum mishpacha kula. If he doesn't have any other children, right? If he has other children, then all the slaves are owned by the children. And therefore, we ignore this fetus. Fetus has no bearing on the situation whatsoever. Right? This is against Rabbi Yosi. If he doesn't have sons, but he has brothers who inherit him, right? Meaning sons or daughters, because if he had daughters, the daughters would inherit. And whoever inherits him, whether he has no brothers, whatever family member is going to inherit him, because he has someone to inherit him, that someone will allow, right? They're a kohen, and now they inherit these slaves. They allow the slaves to eat truma. And we don't care that there's this unborn fetus. That's the rabbi's opinion. So now, it sounds to me, if you heard that statement, what would you think? Shmuel says, everything we said until now is Rabbi Yosi. But the rabbis say this. Who do you think he holds by? The rabbis. First of all, we always usually hold by the majority opinion. And the way he worded it, this is it. But the rabbis say, he's ending with the rabbis. So, Zovelo Svirale, is he saying this is Rabbi Yosi and I don't hold like him because the rabbis disagree? But that's a problem. He said to Rav Bagdata, Poke itili be'asara, go bring me 10 people so I can testify in front of them. That's a way of basically saying, give me a megaphone, I'm going to tell everybody. I want to say in front of them, this is the real big statement, about the significance of an ubal. Okay? That what does that mean? Anyone who gives a gift to a fetus and says, I'm giving you a gift, or however, they take ownership over something for a fetus, that works, even though it's just a fetus. Okay, this is kind of on the side. The fetus is something of significance. Again, I mentioned there's lots of sugyas that go the other way, which is why there's room in halacha for abortions. But this one, and that's why people say, well, there's different sources. This is one that would say the ubar is already significant enough that you can already give them ownership rights to property. That would fit perfectly with Rabbi Yosi. So it sounds like Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yosi. So he said, no. This is Rabbi Yosi. I agree with him. Just know that the rabbis say this, to which they say, my kamashvan. So why are you telling us this opinion that we don't really hold by? Well, to please Rabbanit, they do Rabbi Yosi. He wanted you to know that there's a machloket about it. Okay, that doesn't surprise us in the world of Gemara, right? To know that there's some other opinion. Umi plige, do they really disagree? Wait a minute. Matav Rabbi Zakkai, he brings a source that seems to contradict that. Zo edud he Rabbi Yosi mi pishmaya b'avtal yom. He testified this. His opinion was testified in the name of Shmaya and Avtal Yom. Vehodulo, and the rabbis agreed with him. So now, or admitted to him. Okay, we're going to have to define this word exactly. So Amar Ravashi, mikatane vikiblu. It doesn't say they accepted his opinion. Hodulo katane. Hodulo means they agreed with him somewhat. Okay, it doesn't mean they said you're totally right. So what does it mean? The mistaber tame. What they were saying is there's logic to what you're saying. Okay, but we like your reasoning, but it's not like we're going to hold by you. Okay, in which case we show in the end there are two different opinions. Now we're going to have a braita that brings three different opinions. Okay, Chachamim are not mentioned here. And the second two are not going to be really clear from quoting the braita. We're going to first go in depth into the third one and then into the second one. And that's going to basically take us until close to the end of the daf. Hiniach banim elu ve'elu, so Tanu Rabbanan, quote from a braita. Hiniach banim elu ve'elu ochlim. If he left sons, okay, this is a regular case. If he leaves sons, then they can eat, meaning her avdei melug, her avdei tzon barzel. All can eat as long as there are sons. She's not pregnant. If he had no sons and he leaves her pregnant, right, when he dies, nobody eats. Because remember, we don't know, right? Her slaves who are melug go with her and she can't eat because maybe she has a baby with him, but maybe she doesn't, right? He's not born yet. And the tzon barzel don't eat because of the ubar messes it up. This is Rabbi Yosi. Okay, because in any case there's an ubar, right? It messes him up. In this case, there's no other sons, just the ubar. For sure, the slaves can't eat because the ubar messes it up, because the ubar is the only inheritor. That's the case we've been discussing until now, where there are sons and there's a pregnant woman. Since she can continue to eat because she has sons through the kohen, her melog can eat. This again is just repeating what we've learned. This is what we've been saying all along, right? That because he's a part owner, messes it up for all the other brothers, because again, we don't know why, either because he's a zal, because he's like the mother, or because he's the other, he's not like the mother, but he's a part owner, and that messes it up because Eino Yilod, Eino Machil. Not born messes it up. Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yosi, Omel Mishum Aviv. Now, this is Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosi, says in his father's name. At this point, we're going to assume he's disagreeing with him, although we don't really understand what he means. Habat ma'acheret haben eino ma'achil. If there's daughters alive, right, the kohen has daughters, then the slaves can eat. If he has sons, no. We don't know why. We'll get back to this much later. Rabbi Shimon and Yochai omel, scharim yochelu, Kulan nekevot lo yochel. If there's sons alive, meaning, right, he has other sons, then the tzon barzel can eat. If all of them are girls, he only has daughters, and then there's this ubav, lo yochelu. Why? Maybe the child born will be a male, in which case the entire ownership will all go to the boy. The girls will have nothing if it's a boy. And that means he's a full owner, which means he's going to mess up the tzon barzel. To which the Gemara says, and that's why we're going to start with Rabbi Shimon Yochai here, it would also be a problem if the child born is a girl. Why? Because if there's, let's say, 4 girls, and then there's this baby, and the baby's a girl. If the baby's a boy, the baby gets full ownership rights and will mess up the tzon barzel from eating. But, it's, again, right now, because it's an uba. If it's and because right now it may happen as it potentially has full ownership rights, even if it has partial ownership rights, meaning if it's only girls and there's now this newborn is going to be a girl, the girl also has at least, right, a fifth of the inheritance, which should mess it up as well, according to what we learned from Rabbi Yosi. So they say, well, chada va'od kamar. It's actually both. Okay? Chada de nekeva nami pasla. In other words, even if it's a girl, it'll also mess it up. In other words, it's either which way. Okay? Whether it's a boy, whether it's a girl, it's going to mess it up. Okay? Because at this point, the ubar definitely has ownership rights. But let's go this way. If there's sons, doesn't matter, only sons, it could be sons and daughters, but what happens? If there's sons, the sons definitely are inheritors. The daughters were safek, because maybe this baby was going to be a boy and take the whole thing. But we want to know, does this ubar have ownership rights? So now we're going to actually have 2 explanations for this. The first one basically says the following. But wait, there's an ubar. The ubar has partial ownership rights, potentially, right? Now, what's going to happen? There's 2 tracks. Either it'll be a male and then it'll have ownership rights, or it'll be a female and it won't have ownership rights. So, but there's a 50-50 chance, right? If I asked you, 50-50 chance it'll be a boy, the boy will have ownership rights. So therefore, at this point, it should mess up the slaves from eating. But, okay, turning now to Amubet, kasaval ein chosheshin lemiuta. It's actually not a 50-50 chance that the child's going to be a boy. Why? Because 50-50 boy-girl, but within that 50-50, maybe the child won't be born at all. Maybe it'll be a nefel, right? Like a non-viable fetus. So because there's this, it's only a 48% chance or a 40% chance, right? Depending on how common it was for children not to make it in those days. But there's less than a 50% chance it's going to be born a boy, which means if it's born a girl, it has no ownership rights. So basically, either it's going to be born a girl or it won't be born at all. More chances are that it won't be born at all, and therefore it doesn't have ownership rights, and therefore the slaves can eat because there's only maybe it'll have ownership rights to the slave. So therefore, we don't worry about a minority, right? Maybe it'll happen. So that's why, right? In the first case, did it matter boy or girl? So there was no percentages. Either which way it would have been an owner, part owner, because there were only daughters. In this case, is less of a 50% chance that it'll be born and be a boy. And therefore, we ignore it. Again, this is Rabbi Shimon Yochai disagreeing with Rabbi Yosi. And as he agrees with the logic, but in the end, he says, this is just a minority chance that it's going to be what you said. We are really concerned for the 48% chance that this might happen. But we can rectify the situation. What's the problem? We don't want to not feed these avadim, tzon barzel. We want them to be able to eat truma. They're in a Kohen's house. They want it, right? We can rectify the situation. How? And this is a very famous sugya. It comes up in Gittin in the case of uprooting kiddushin and all that, and a very fascinating case about the power of the courts. So, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, Yetomim shabau lachlok b'nechsei avihem. We're a bunch of orphans, underage. We want to divide up our father's inheritance, but we don't have any rights. So what do? Beitim amidim lahem apotropos, uborer lahem chelek yafeh. Each one gets a person who's in charge, an apotropos, who basically is in charge of their part of the will, and they're part of the inheritance. And each apotropos chooses, I want this field, I want this item, I want that, right? They divide it up for each of the children. Now, let's say the children grow up and they say, it's very nice that we had this apotropos and he gave us this, but I want that. Can they have the rights to go back and redo? So higdilu yicholim limchot. Okay, that's what Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel. They can change. They can say we reject what they did. But Rav Nachman dideamal higdilu ein yicholim limchot. No way, no how can they change this? Dim came makoch beitin yafeh. What was the whole purpose of the court? We're going to undermine the power of the courts. If we say whatever apotropos they gave is basically we can undo, well, there was no power to the courts in the end. Now, there's always this concern. We want to make sure the courts have power. Otherwise, our whole system will fall apart. So he says, no. In which case, what does that have to do with it? Well, why don't we say, if we want to rectify the situation, that's what he says, takante, there's a way to rectify it. Divide up the nechassim of the father with apotropos. And we have the 4 sons and the one who's unborn. So give everyone an apotropos. Make sure all the avdei tzon barzel go to those brothers. And the ubar, the fetus, will get something else of equal value, but not the slaves. And then he does not an owner at all. And since it can't be undone, this would work perfectly. So they say, well, the fact that not everyone agrees with Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, does that mean Lema de Rav Nachman Tanaihi? That this whole idea of whether Rav Nachman, this was our second explanation, right? This is if you do hold Chosheshin Lemiyuta, that he'll be a boy, right? Then you can go with this approach to explain Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. But they say, are you going to say that Rav Nachman is a machloket Tanaim and that's why not everyone agrees with him? And they didn't want to say that because they basically held like Rav Nachman. So they say, lo, Rav Nachman, the other ones who disagree with him just say, we're not worried that it's going to be a boy, right? They disagree on the principle of Chosheshin or not Chosheshin L'miyuta, and you don't have to say the machloket's all about Rav Nachman or not. Because again, we had 2 explanations for Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon bar Rabbi Yosi omer mishum aviv. Now we have to explain this very unclear sentence. Habat ma'achil habeni no ma'achil. So now that means if there's a daughter, they can eat. If there's a son, then the avadim can't eat. So Mishna ben de lo ma'achil. That's why if there's a son, can you not eat? Mishum chelko shel ubar. It must be because the ubar, right? Again, this is the opposite of what Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said. Because the ubar is significant no matter what, right? We're not worried maybe he'll be a girl or something, right? And not inherit. No, because of the ubar. So bat nami lo ta'achil mipnei shel chelko shel ubar. Also, if there's a daughter, all the more so, there's 100% chance this kid is going to inherit, whether it's a boy or whether it's a girl. So I don't understand. So Amar Abaye, first explanation, we're going to have 2 explanations. First Abaye, and we're going to have 2 questions on him. One we'll answer, one we won't. Amar Abaye, hacham benechasim wati maskina, ukegon di'ika ben bahade bat. So now they say it's when there's not a lot of money and there's sons and daughters. Now, what happens? If there's not a lot of money in the estate, instead of the sons inheriting, the money goes to give food to the girls. The girls in the end basically get the money because first you have to take care of the girls and give them food because the assumption is they can't work on their own as much. They can't make their own living. So the estate has to first feed the girls. Only if there's money left do the boys get the inheritance. So in this case, the ubar is not going to get anything. That's why bat ma'achil. She has all the rights to the eved because there's no money of inheritance to talk about. So if there's not a lot of money, could go right manafshaf. Either which way, this ubar doesn't have a share. If it's going to be a boy, lo adif mehai dekat, right? He's no different than the boy who's alive, and the boy who's alive has no share in the property because it's all going to feed the girls. Ibati amayachla. Well, if he's a daughter, you might say, well, then he has rights because he'll be a girl. But in utero, he doesn't have any rights because bitakante de Rabbanan, and that's why is she eating? She's eating bitakante de Rabbanan. The rabbis institute we have to feed these girls. The rabbis didn't say we have to feed mouths that don't exist yet, right? It's not a mouth to feed yet. So basically, this ubar at this point has no rights to anything. But the Gemara doesn't like this because but look at the end of this. It said Shema yimatzehu ubar zachar ve'ein lebanim bimkom ben klum. Maybe the ubar will be male, and then the girls don't get anything. The girls don't get anything. It must be there was a lot of money because then the girls don't get anything. We're talking about a case where the girls get. So they say, Adrabah, no, nechasim. This is the question. Nechasim muatim debanoninu. It should be the opposite. The girls get everything if there's not a lot of money. So they say, seifat and nechasim urabit. The Reisha is talking about a little money. The end is talking about a lot of money, and they're talking about 2 different cases, and that's how we resolve it. But there's another problem. Nechasim muatim debanoninu. Are you saying, and I saw someone ask this about a different case before, about when the girls get mizonot, does that mean they own the rights to the property? No, it doesn't really mean that they own the slaves because let's look here. They're really theirs? No. Let's say there's not a lot of money in the estate, and the Yatomim, this is like the case we ended with yesterday. The Yatomim come in and sell it right away. Their sale is a sale, nothing to talk about. In other words, they own the items. So they own these avadim, even though the girls, right, if the slaves work, whatever money goes to the girls, but the ownership rights belong to the sons. So therefore, this doesn't make any sense. So therefore, they change what Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yosi says. And lamai bat dekatane aim. It didn't mean if there's a daughter. It meant if there's a mother. Okay. Now, what does this mean? What it means is the mother, right? This is what, one second, right? The mother can feed her nichse melog. That's what it's telling you. Ima ha'em ma'achila. Okay. The mother gives her slaves food, but the boys, right? If there's a son, then the nichse tzon barzel can't eat. That's what he was saying. To which the Gemara says, well, then, ihachi hainu Rabbi Yosi. That's exactly what Rabbi Yosi said. Remember? That was Rabbi Yosi. Nichse melog, go with the mother. Nichse tzon barzel, go with the sons. So he's saying nothing different than his father. We listed this as three opinions. Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Yishmael explaining his father's opinion, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And right now we're trying to explain Rabbi Yishmael explaining his father as if it's different from the first. And this sounds like it's exactly the first. Once you switch bat to aim, you've basically explained it like Rabbi Yosi. To which they answer, Kula Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yosi, katanela. No. What they're saying is this is Rabbi Yosi. And then they say Rabbi Yishmael explained all this in the name of his father, and he's just explaining a little bit more. Basically, there aren't three opinions. There's two opinions, and the opinion of Rabbi Shimon quoting his father is the same as Rabbi Yosi that we saw, and that resolves it. It obviously doesn't seem like the simple reading of that braita, but that's how they explain it, because otherwise it really doesn't make sense. Now we're going to finish with this last Mishna and a little bit of Gemara on that, and that will continue much more into now we're in a much more basic case, which is no slaves. We're talking about the woman herself in a particular situation. Either she's going to be the daughter of a Kohen with some connection to a Yisrael, where she ate truma before. Can she continue to eat truma? This, we're going to say all these cases disqualify her from continuing to eat truma. And we're going to be talking about a bat Yisrael who comes from a house where they don't eat truma, and she's now connected in some way to a Kohen, not yet fully married. Does she get to eat truma? And the answer is no. In this case, even though she's somewhat connected to the Kohen, she doesn't yet get to eat truma. We're going to start listing all the cases, and the Gemara will start explaining case by case why, yes, why. Basically, we're going to be, and this is one of those cases, stringent in every direction. Okay, basically, stringent to not allow a bat Yisrael to eat truma, and stringent to basically disqualify a bat Kohen from going back to her father's house and eating truma. Ha'ubar, which is the case we just described, if she's pregnant and she has no kids yet with the other, right, with the Kohen, and she's a bat Yisrael, so we don't yet know if the kid's going to be born, so we don't allow her to eat truma anymore. And if she's a bat Kohen, we don't allow her to go back home to her father's house. Hayabam, if she's supposed to do yibum, so let's say she was married to a Kohen, he died, she's now supposed to do yibum with the Kohen, but she didn't do yibum yet. So that doesn't allow her to continue eating truma. And if she's a bat Kohen, it doesn't allow her to go home to her father's house and eat truma there, because she's a shomeret yabam, right? She's supposed to do yibum with a non-kohen. Erusin, she's just engaged. We've talked about this a number of times. Engagement doesn't allow you to eat truma, but also you can't go back home and eat truma either in your father's house if you're a bat Kohen. Then hacheresh, if you're married to a deaf mute, the marriage is only relevant on a rabbinic level. Okay, this is because deaf mute in halacha is considered without da'at. Okay, we've talked about this many times and how this might change nowadays, but they perceive the child as the person as if not, which means that if you marry them, your marriage is only on a rabbinic level. So you're not married on a Torah level, so that doesn't allow you to eat the truma. And it also disqualifies you from going home, though. It's got the chumrah both ways. Ben tesha shanim b'yom echad. We don't know what this means yet. You had something to do with a 9 and a day. Remember, 9 and a day means they're capable of having sexual relations. You had something to do with a man who's that age. We don't know yet what we're talking about. Gemara will explain tomorrow's daf. Safek shehu ben tesha shani. Oh, so sorry. Poslim v'lo machilim. Again, it disqualifies you and also doesn't allow you. That depends whether you're the bat Kohen or you're the bat Yisrael. Right? Each one is referring to a different case. Safek shehu ben tesha shanim b'yom echad. Safek sheino. We're not sure if he's 9 in a day or not. We don't know exactly his age. We're not sure if he is a gadol or not. Okay, whether he has simanim of right. We don't yet know what these cases are. This is a totally different thing. And okay, here we have our little chart. We've had this case before. Okay, we have a case where, sorry, one second. Okay, we have a case where Reuben and Shimon are brothers, and Shimon has a daughter, Yael, and Reuben marries his brother's daughter. He's married also to Shula, and the house falls and kills Reuben and Yael. We don't know who died first. If Reuben dies first, then Yael and Shula are both married to him. Yael can't do Yibum with Shimon because it's his daughter, so that would exclude Shula. She wouldn't have to do Yibum at all. But if Yael died first, then when Reuben died, he only had one wife, Shula, and therefore Shula would do Yibum with Shimon. So therefore we say, do Chalitza, don't do Yibum. Okay, that is a case we've seen already before. Good question why it's here in the Mishna. Ha'ubal. So now we're starting with the Gemara. We'll go through the first two cases very quickly, and with that, we'll finish for today. Ibat kohen yisrael hi pasale. Kinureha prat lemuber. We already went over all this, so it'll be repetitive. If she's a bat kohen who's engaged, who's pregnant with the Yisrael when he dies, so she can't go back to Beit Avia because she's not like she was in her youth. And the pasuk says you can go back to your father's house like you were when you were in your youth. You weren't pregnant, so she can't. Ibat Yisrael the kohen he lo ma'achila. If she was married to a kohen, we don't yet know if she has children yet, right? Because yalid ma'achil she'eno yalid eno ma'achil. Only a born child can let her eat truma, not an unborn child. Hayabam. So again, she's now about to do Yibum with this Kohen, or reverse, Yisrael. We don't know. We'll see both. Ibat Kohen Yisrael, who he pasila. If she's a bat Kohen who's supposed to do Yibum to Yisrael, she can't go back and eat truma. V'shaval Beit Avia, right? It's only when she goes back, and she can't go back to her father's house because she has zika to this, that she's supposed to do Yibum. Prat l'shomer yabam. Ibat Yisrael lekohen he lo ma'achila because kinyan kaspo amar Rachmana. V'ha kinyan da'achiv. If you also can't view her as exactly attached yet to him, right? This is their zika, but not as full. Only you can eat a kinyan kaspo, someone you own, right? You did kiddushin with. He didn't do it with her. It was his brother, and his brother's dead. So she can't eat truma yet until she goes through with the yibum. Then she'll be able to eat truma if she's about Yisrael, and the yabam is a kohen. Okay, with that, we'll stop for today. We'll go through all, right, in tomorrow's class, which is a lot shorter than today's. We'll go through all the upcoming cases, okay? It's already be up on this site in a little bit. It's recorded. It'll go up soon, and you'll see it's at least a bit of a shorter shiur than today. So have a great day, everybody. We'll end here. Shabbat Shalom, and we'll meet up again on Sunday.